talk about fair trade and why minimum wages are not enough. Then, of course, you have many questions. Sustainable T-shirts, if the workers are not paid, can the T-shirts be called sustainable? What is a minimum wage? What is a wage that ensures the life of people? And how can we make sure that this is really also taken up in the standards? We've got an expert here. I would like to thank you very much for being here. I told you that we are talking about fair trade. Perhaps you, as one of the board members, can also tell us what fair trade does.
Okay.
But before we start, would you like to have a water?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, fair trade has been around for over 30 years. It is a seal for fair trade. Can you hear me? Wonderful. It feels confusing. Everybody can hear it, yeah. Well, it is a symbol that was established 30 years ago for coffee, tea, and chocolate. And it is about supporting the producers and putting them center stage at the beginning of this supply chain, and to ensure sustainable production through a number of criteria. And for this, the producers get a minimum price and an investment premium. This was the basic idea. Then in 2007, cotton was added, a standard for cotton, and since 2017, we've had a standard for the whole supply chain.
Okay, so we are in the beginning, and the supply chain is a very good buzzword for me right at the beginning of the discussion, because I love this word, the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, a long, long term, and we could also discuss why it is such a difficult name, but it's great to have it. And then we've got the EU textile strategy for circular and recyclable textiles, so some things are happening at the political scene. What do you think about it? Is this giving you a good feeling so that you say, yes, now we are getting started, this is the right approach?
Well, the feeling, yes. The message has been heard by policymakers after Rana Plaza, which will celebrate its 10th Jubilee. There is an awareness now that human rights are violated in the textile industry. Everybody knows now after so many discussions. But the question is what we do about this. There are so many companies that can't come to grips with their supply chains. They did not know where their production was and what they could do about it. For 10 years, we've been discussing that we need to create transparency, that we must not turn a blind eye on matters. We have to rethink our acting, but not ad hoc and nor under pressure of time. But we have to talk to each other in the long term, and we also have to discuss prices. This is being heard now increasingly. The Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, long name, is one approach, but from the fair trade perspective, the most important element is missing, and that is the providing the producers with the sufficient money to ensure human rights are not violated. Each law that is being enforced, of course, costs or brings costs for changeover. You have to adapt to the costs of this process, and who actually pays for this is neither included in the German Act nor in the EU directive. This is one of the central issues where fair trade says, well, you have to actually see both sides of the medal, because what do we want to achieve with this legislation, and how can we achieve it? How can the producers in India, Bangladesh, or wherever fulfill these criteria?
Yes, this is what I also think. Laws are good, legislation is good, the idea is good, but is it really feasible? Because the producers sometimes cannot really implement things for various reasons, because just a new legislation is imposed and they now have to find a solution. Do you also help there? Do you support them?
Well, at Fairtrade, we pursue a number of approaches. On the one hand, there is a standard. There is a control, an audit, auditors. So this is the classical seal business. These are the criteria that are checked, and then you get the certificate. But in the textile area, matters are far more complex, and we know that we have to start differently. Here, you have to draw up programs to make sure that the employees know about their rights, that there is or that there are employee representatives, that there is a dialogue forum between employees and management or owner. And when you're traveling in Asia, you know how different the cultures are. So to enable dialogue and to understand the other side. This is what we offer, and we have established this very successfully in many factories.
This means you have somebody on site who they can turn to, or is there a trainer going to the companies? So how exactly is it done?
Fairtrade, on an international scale, runs offices. We're represented in Asia by our producers, network of Asian producers. The headquarters is situated in Bangalore, and there we have employees who look after various products and provide training. And in the south, in Tirupur or in the north, for instance, we have textile experts who visit the factories and run the textile programs.
So the factories are then I have a link to Fairtrade. Is this the right way to express this? It's about being able to really see how people get their wage. How close are you to the factories? This is my question, basically.
Well, there are two links. We actually have advisors on site who actually visit the factories at regular intervals, provide training. Also the basic training, for instance, about the rights employees have. What are the working hours? Am I allowed to use the toilet during my working hours? Am I allowed to take my kid to the kindergarten or creche? The young women don't even dare asking to know. This is basic knowledge. I have a question. Who do I approach it to or address it to? Is there a complaints committee? Is there an employee representative committee? All of these things need to be installed, and there must be training provided because there's change occurring in the headcount. This is what our advisors do. And then next to the advice, the consulting, there's the certification. The auditors go in, look at whether all of the committees exists. Do they work? Do the workers, the female workers, well represented? Are there any complaint measures, or can they use the toilet during working hours? So 140 criteria are being checked, and of course also how much money is paid in terms of a wage, and applying the fair trade textile standards. This is the only standard that actually expects or presupposes a living wage. In most countries, there is a definition of a minimum wage. And we at Fairtrade say this is not enough. It must be a living wage. So a person earning this living wage must be able to eat, to have accommodation, afford apparel and transport, and probably also save some money for unforeseen events. And in Fairtrade factories, the factory, within a time frame of 6 years, actually undertakes to bring up the minimum wage to the living wage. And we also check and audit the increases of the 6 years.
I'm just checking the clock. Yes, we still have time. And this is exactly what I wanted to mention. I would like to come back to the wages. Yes, a living wage, yes, we understand. But the question is, who defines what a living wage is? And how can you really ensure that it's respected?
Well, there are there are various organizations that define a living wage, whether it's the Asian floor wage or whether it's Fairtrade. At Fairtrade, we have developed the anchor method that actually looks at sites where there are no calculations, because living wages vary widely on a regional scale, and this is why you also need to develop these on a regional scale. And we look at whether a person can make a living on this. How many calories do the people need per month? What is the accommodation and its cost? How much does transport cost? So a whole set of costs are looked at. In Tirupur, in Tamil Nadu, we have a living wage of 18,500 rupees that we calculated for last year. This is roughly $250. This is for the lowest unskilled category of laborers. If we look at the minimum wage, it stands at 8,000 rupees, so less than half of the living wage. 8,000 rupees. A family requires 200 rupees to have food, so 6,000 rupees are gone just on food. And then you know that this is not a living wage. Accommodation costs about 6,000 rupees. So 6 plus 6 is 12. So with a minimum wage of 8,000 rupees, you can't pay for it.
So the living wage is a must. It needs to be introduced. But why do social standards not play a role? This shouldn't be possible. This should not happen.
Well, I think one thing is it's so hard to prove. When you have a garment, you can actually detect pollutants very quickly. But going one step back to the seamstress or the farmer, this is far more difficult. To do so, you need support. The second point is there is no good lobby for this. The textile industry, for cost reasons, actually left Europe some time ago, went to Asia, and always looked for countries that were even cheaper than before, instead of giving some thought to a long-term system that ensures good working conditions for all parties involved. And this question is now only tabled. And I am very, very happy for the initiation of the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, because it was introduced to ensure the most important human rights. And the textile industry is the industry, following the electronic industry, that actually has the strongest fault lines.
Yes, and we discussed this in the past 2 days.
And you have to admit, the ways were so complex and so intertwined that we could not really see what happened on the way. And this is why a beautiful new entrepreneurship, a group of fashion entrepreneurs has emerged that take a very close look at where these garments are produced. Can I stay in close touch with these people, and can I contribute to an improvement?
And when we are looking at this from a fashion point of view, from the brand point of view, you see that the brands are getting more interested? Do they approach you?
Yes, we have a lot of demand, but unfortunately not to the extent I would like to see, because when we say, well, this is also associated with costs, because when we look at fair trade cotton, sustainable cotton, there is a fair trade premium added to this fair trade cotton that does not feature with other standards. And in the textile standard, you undertake to contribute or to actually change over to living wages over the next 6 years.
And how does certification really work with fair trade?
It works as follows. We actually conclude a contract with the companies that ensures that we can audit these factories at any times without prior announcement. Then there are notice boards in these factories saying, if you have any complaints, this is the telephone number, contact us. But normally, a factory would be audited first to see how close they already are to the fair trade standard. Do they require further training? And then the factory is certified, and then it is audited on an annual basis, whether it stays on course.
So a brand that finally decides to do this, to use the fair trade seal, can assume that everything is really done in the right way, and they can rely on this, because it's also a matter of trust at the end of the day.
Of course, this is why it is important that in these factories, the capacity utilization in these fair trade factories is as high as possible. And this is an invitation to other brands to also contact those fair trade certified factories, because our experience is that these factories cannot really fully utilize their capacities. They still have to accept conventional orders, and this, of course, aggravates the funding.
And if a fashion brand is interested, how can you get the certification?
Simply call us at Fairtrade or send an email and say, I'm interested. Does it work? How does it work? And yeah, this is what my colleagues and I are available for.
Well, I come back to my favorite word, supply chain due diligence. Act. This is one side, but it also needs to be transported to the brand world. On the one hand, we do have some legislation, but the brands also have some questions. How can they make sure that everything is done in the right way? And how far can you guarantee transparency?
Yeah. Very important. The audits and the certifications are in writing. You're always informed that all of the rules were complied with or that they were not complied with. This needs to be seen as a process, because when there are issues arising, we're not saying that was it, bye-bye. No, instead, we have a closer look at the problem. Why could certain criteria not be fulfilled? And we then try to sort out matters. And we, as a system, we have 2 control instances. The fair trade standard is developed under the ISTIL criteria. So in consultation and in dialogue with the parties affected, both the factory owners and the cotton farmers, and the fair trade certified brand, we all talk about the further development of the standard. At regular intervals, this standard is also re-edited, and the certification is controlled as well. So we're certified by ISO 65, DAX accreditation, and they make sure that the formal matters are correct, and is it true what we say about ourselves? Are the processes correct? So these are the possibilities we have for us to be as transparent as possible. So we also have our own procedures controlled, so that people do not only have to believe my blue eyes, but that they have an evidence.
And the communication between the producers and the brands, will this always go via you, or will the brands directly contact the factories?
The partners that we cooperate with are in close touch with their factories, and they can talk about orders at a very early stage, because this is part of the process. This close dovetailing, to know next month we will place an order. Do you have enough jobs or workplaces available? This is the volume, so that it really works better with planning from both sides.
Which means that at the end of the day, you just have to make sure that at the beginning of the chain everything is set up in the right way, so that the brand can then also show the seal, the certification, and they can be sure that all the social criteria are fulfilled to have a good product based on a fair background. Is this the right way to put it?
This is the desire. We're currently doing this in India for European production. Fair trade doesn't work, because the original idea was to improve the trade relations with the global south, the southern hemisphere. So it doesn't work for each and every brand. Only where we're active. In India, we've solved this pretty well. In Pakistan, we've taken the first steps. So step by step.
And now, a very current project. What could you tell us? Is there something that you could talk about? Because we don't have a lot of time.
Well, in India, we're busy changing over to organic cotton. You probably know that the organic certification was suspended there in India, and that we had to start from scratch again. In Pakistan, we're establishing complaint mechanisms in many factories, and we're exciting to see the resulting accords. And at present, my colleagues in India are in Tamil Nadu looking at such a factory. And if you Google fair trade on social media, there are new reports out. And the great project was the brand fashion project. They're known for workwear, actually, but also fan items, and they went with 10 football National League clubs in the fields and looking at organic cotton. And in future there will be fair fan wear. Düsseldorf is part of it. Cologne is out, unfortunately, but Hamburg, HSV, and St. Pauli, and Stuttgart, and Union Berlin. So many football clubs are part of this. I would knock on the door in Cologne. Maybe you can contact Fortuna Cologne. Yeah.
Yes, this is great, because this is really giving more information, and probably then the population gets a better understanding that something needs to be done there. And you already appealed to the people here, and there are also many brand owners. Perhaps they can also turn to you in order to get some information. So the poorest of the poor definitely need help. They need somebody to support them, and you inspired all of us, and really everybody should just talk to you, and you will be here to talk to people who are interested. Thank you very much.